I considered myself a rational person who never rushed major decisions. Yet, I still walked into the biggest heartbreak of my life. I married the woman I believed was my perfect match, only to discover she'd been lying about her ex for years. This wasn't about harmless white lies. She'd crafted a betrayal so elaborate, I had no clue what was happening right under my nose. It started back in college, where she dated a guy who seemed to have a hold on her from day one. She swore he was the worst decision of her life, controlling, cheating, draining her finances, sabotaging friendships. When we got together, she claimed to have blocked him everywhere. She insisted he'd moved 3 states away, that their relationship was permanently over. I believed her. I trusted her. After all, she was the woman I asked to marry me, my confidant, my partner, and for years, my best friend. We celebrated birthdays, confided in each other about work stress, and daydreamed about the future. She seemed earnest and loyal. I thought we shared everything, that no secret could slip past us. Not once did I suspect how wrong I was. No matter how careful I'd been in other aspects of my life, I let my guard down with her. She had a way of looking at me that made me believe every word she said. I ignored the occasional red flags, convinced that love conquers all. It was truly the biggest mistake I ever made. A month before our wedding, a mutual friend dropped a bomb. He told me my fiancée had been in touch with her ex. Alarmed but trying to stay calm, I confronted her. She teared up immediately, saying he'd reached out to apologize for his behavior. She claimed she'd shut him down and had no intention of seeing him again. She looked so genuine, trembling lip and all, that I chose to believe her. I told myself everyone deserves closure, and if she said it was nothing, it must be nothing. I did a guilty check of her phone once, found nothing suspicious, and felt a wave of relief. She must have been telling the truth, right? Looking back, I cringe at how naive I was. She was already an expert at hiding her tracks. I didn't know about secret apps or fake contact names. I didn't realize that her ex hadn't moved away at all. Instead, he was right here in the same city, planning to crash our future. But at the time, I dismissed every doubt. We were busy preparing for the wedding, finalizing details, sending out invitations. She seemed devoted and excited, always talking about how she wanted our families to blend and how she couldn't wait to spend forever with me. It never occurred to me that she might be lying through her teeth, promising a faithfulness she had no intention of upholding. That conversation with our friend should have been my wake-up call, but I slept through it. On our wedding day, I was all smiles. Friends said we looked radiant, locked in a dream. She exchanged vows, promising loyalty and unconditional love. I drank in every word, oblivious to the secrets buried beneath her polished exterior. The first year of marriage was actually wonderful. We took a short honeymoon trip, moved into a cozy apartment, and started discussing future plans like buying a house or having kids. She'd hint at names, showing me pictures of cute nurseries. It felt surreal how blissful everything seemed. Occasionally, I'd recall that one warning about her ex, but she'd reassure me. She'd say he was gone and that his number was blocked. I accepted it, wanting so badly to believe. Though she guarded her phone more than before, I never pushed too hard. Everyone deserves some privacy, right? Whenever I felt a flicker of unease, I'd bury it. I loved her deeply, and I wanted our marriage to succeed. I told myself trust was key. She'd done such a convincing job that I actually felt guilty if I even thought about snooping. So I stayed in the dark while she kept in touch with him behind my back. Looking back, I wonder if certain friends or family suspected something but remained silent. If they did, they never shared it. I kept living in that bubble of newlywed optimism, convinced we were on the same page, forging a path forward together. Little did I know she was forging a different path entirely. Eventually, subtle signs crept in. She'd work late more often, saying deadlines had piled up, or a colleague needed help. I remember fixing dinner, waiting for her texts, only to receive a single vague message about being stuck. When she came home, she looked tired but oddly energized, as if running on adrenaline. Sometimes I'd glimpse her phone lighting up and she'd hurry to silence it. When I asked, she'd shrug and say it was just a coworker or her mom. I wanted to believe her, so I ignored the uneasy feeling in my gut. The real blow came when I tried to print documents from her laptop one evening. I saw an open chat minimized at the bottom of the screen. His name wasn't visible, but the conversation told me everything. They were talking about meeting soon, referencing inside jokes, and sharing details about how they'd kept everything hidden. My hands shook as I scrolled through message after message, seeing how long this had been going on. She'd been sleeping with him, comparing me to him, even laughing at my cluelessness. I felt numb. Rather than confront her immediately, I closed the chat, printed my files, and acted normal. I needed time to process, to figure out my next move. My heart pounded the whole night, but I lay beside her as if nothing had changed. In that moment, I realized trusting her blindly had been a colossal mistake. I was ready to expose the truth, but not without a plan. I spent the next week gathering proof. Late at night, I'd wait until she was asleep, then check her phone. She had hidden messages, saved under alias contacts, detailing how and when they'd meet. I took screenshots, emailed them to a secure folder, and made sure to cover my tracks. The extent of their affair was devastating. It had begun before we were even married, right under my nose. They talked about me like I was a predictable safety net, someone she could rely on while getting her thrills elsewhere. I discovered he hadn't moved away. That was her biggest lie. He lived across town, and they met whenever they could slip away unnoticed. My anger grew with every new piece of evidence. I fought the urge to scream at her, to throw accusations, but I held it in. I wanted her to think everything was normal. Her behavior didn't change. She texted him in the bathroom, whispered with him on her lunch break, and came home to me with that same sweet smile. I felt sick just looking at her. But I channeled that fury into a purpose. I wasn't going to be her fool anymore. I scheduled an appointment with a divorce lawyer, explaining everything and showing him the proof. He advised me to keep documenting, to be patient, and to prepare for confrontation at just the right moment. I agreed. If she wanted to live a lie, I'd give her one final performance. When I felt confident I had enough evidence, I decided to test her further. One night, she came home late, and I casually asked if she'd ever consider an open relationship. Her eyes lit up in surprise before she quickly masked it. She hesitated, then admitted she'd been thinking about the concept. She framed it as a modern approach to marriage, how it could bring us closer by exploring outside connections. I nearly laughed in her face. She was trying to spin her cheating into some grand philosophical stance. I told her I was curious but needed time to think. She looked relieved, as if I'd validated her twisted fantasy of having both me and her ex with zero consequences. Of course, she didn't know I was already planning my exit. I kept playing along. I pretended to entertain discussions about boundaries and rules, acting like the dedicated husband who just wanted her to be happy. Deep down, my blood boiled. Her audacity was breathtaking. She was openly admitting she wanted to sleep with someone else, most likely the same man she'd denied having any contact with. I found myself both furious and strangely amused by how bold her lies were. Part of me wondered if she got a thrill from fooling me, or if she truly believed I was that naive. Either way, I was done being her unwitting accomplice. I would let her believe she was safe, right up until the moment I revealed how wrong she was. I bided my time, waiting for the perfect opportunity to confront her with every shred of proof. I wanted to see that look in her eyes when she realized she'd lost everything. Meanwhile, I followed my lawyer's advice, checking financial records, making sure I had documentation of our assets. I knew she'd fight me if she sensed a divorce looming. She might beg or she might rage, but either way, I wanted to walk away on my own terms. Then, the day came when I caught her leaving work earlier than she'd claimed. I followed her from a distance, watching her drive across town. She parked outside a shabby building I instantly recognized from her secret texts. I waited, snapped photos on my phone as she greeted him with a kiss, then disappeared inside. My hands trembled with a potent mix of anger and triumph. I had her cornered. There would be no excuses, no denial that this was innocent. I left before they emerged. Seeing them together made my stomach twist. Still, I felt a grim satisfaction that my evidence was now undeniable. That night, I acted normal again. She came home, spun a story about working late, and I nodded, letting her lies wash over me. It was almost surreal how easily she could slip into her routine, as if I were just a background character in her elaborate play. Little did she know the curtain was about to fall, and I was about to bring the whole thing crashing down. I invited her to sit in the living room, saying I wanted to revisit our open relationship talk. She looked a bit apprehensive, but also hopeful. Before she could speak, I placed a folder on the coffee table. I told her to open it. Inside were printed screenshots, phone logs, photos of her entering that building, and even some of her more incriminating messages. The color drained from her face as she flipped through the pages. She stammered, asking where I got all this. I stayed silent, letting the images speak for themselves. Her voice rose, trying to deny or minimize each piece of evidence, but it was obvious she was cornered. Finally, she broke down, sobbing that it had started as a mistake and spiraled out of control. She begged me to understand that she still loved me, that this was just something she couldn't let go of. My anger boiled over. I told her I wasn't there for confessions or apologies. I had consulted a lawyer. Divorce papers were ready. I offered her a simple choice: sign the uncontested papers or watch as I exposed everything to her family, our friends, and even her workplace if necessary. She stared at me in disbelief, tears streaming down her cheeks, calling me cruel. I reminded her that she was the one who shattered our marriage vows. I was simply ensuring I wouldn't be walked over again. I refused to forgive. There would be no acceptance of her betrayal, only consequences. She begged me to let her explain, to try counseling or therapy. She swore she would break it off with him, that she'd do anything to fix our marriage. My stomach churned at the hypocrisy. She'd already tried turning it into an open relationship, hoping I'd give her explicit permission to keep sleeping with her ex. I told her that was never going to happen. She switched tactics, accusing me of invading her privacy and betraying her trust by gathering evidence in secret. The irony made me laugh out loud. I reminded her how she'd systematically lied to me for years, how she'd orchestrated secret meetings and used hidden apps. If anyone had demolished trust, it was her. I gave her a deadline to sign the papers, making it clear that if she fought me on this, I wouldn't hesitate to drag her reputation through the mud. It was harsh, but my patience was gone. She looked at the divorce papers in horror, as if she couldn't believe this was happening. It dawned on her that the safety net she'd relied on was gone. I could see the gears turning, wondering if her ex would catch her when she fell. That wasn't my problem. This was the path she chose, and I was done protecting her from the fallout. She retreated to the bedroom, sobbing. I stood there, numb but oddly liberated. I'd finally taken control of my life, and I wasn't about to second-guess that decision. The following days were a whirlwind. She oscillated between anger, pleading, and defiance. Sometimes she'd approach me in tears, begging for another chance. Other times she'd lash out, calling me cold and vindictive. I stayed firm, refusing to budge. I reminded her this was exactly the future she'd been courting all along. She tried to bring up the possibility of us sharing each other, but I cut her off. There was no reality where I'd remain married to a woman who treated me as her backup plan. I made that crystal clear. Behind the scenes, I arranged to shift my direct deposits and separate finances. I opened a new bank account she knew nothing about. My lawyer drafted a settlement that offered her little more than her personal belongings and a portion of our joint savings. That was generous, considering she'd contributed far less to our shared assets. She refused to sign at first, insisting she deserved more. I reminded her that if we went to court, I'd present all the evidence of her long-term affair, which could hurt her chances in any settlement negotiation. She crumpled at that, realizing she had no leverage. Meanwhile, mutual friends started asking questions. I didn't air all the dirty laundry, just said we were divorcing due to irreconcilable differences. Most people respected my privacy, though a few pressed me for details. She tried to spin her own version of events, but I had enough proof on standby to refute any outright lies if needed. A week later, she sat at the dining table, pen in hand, tears in her eyes, staring at the divorce papers. She'd run out of stall tactics. Without looking at me, she signed them. I took them to the notary that afternoon. The sense of closure was immediate, like a weight lifting off my chest. Yes, we still had to wait for the legal process, but the biggest hurdle was cleared. She asked if there was any chance I'd reconsider. I told her no. Her crocodile tears did nothing for me. I offered to help her move out, but she declined. Over the next few days, she packed her stuff in tense silence. Occasionally, she'd try to talk about the good times we'd shared, maybe hoping to spark my nostalgia. I felt nothing but resentment. The woman I fell in love with wasn't real. She was a mask. She had no remorse until she got caught. I let her see how indifferent I'd become. After she hauled her last box out the door, she paused in the hallway, waiting for me to say something. I gave her a nod, then shut the door. That was it. The marriage was over, and I felt no regret. I'd loved her once, but now all I felt was relief that I'd escaped her web of lies. She wanted forgiveness, but I had no intention of granting it. Her tears meant nothing. She made her choices, and she'd live with them. Once she was gone, I purged every reminder of her from the apartment. Photos, mementos, and keepsakes went into a storage bin. I shoved into the back of the closet. I needed my space free of her memory, at least until I figured out where to move next. Friends asked if I was okay, and I told them I would be. Some expressed surprise at how calm I seemed, but they hadn't seen how twisted things really were. After living under constant deception for so long, the abrupt clarity felt like stepping into fresh air. My lawyer confirmed the paperwork was in order, and we just had to wait for the final decree. I got updates that she moved in with her ex. Maybe that was her only option. I felt a stab of bitterness, wondering if they'd last or if he'd revert to the same toxic behavior that once tormented her. Either way, I reminded myself it was no longer my concern. I'd done what I needed to do. Occasionally, I'd get texts from her, apologizing or asking me to meet up. I ignored them all. If she thought I'd soften over time, she was sorely mistaken. I'd learned my lesson about trusting her words. The damage was done. My life was better off without her manipulations. Day by day, I focused on rebuilding. I picked up new hobbies, spent more time with close friends, and threw myself into work. The more distance I put between us, the stronger I felt. In the months that followed, people started learning bits and pieces of what really happened. One mutual friend confronted her about the affair, and she reportedly crumbled into tears, blaming her ex for luring her back in. Another friend asked me if I'd ever forgive her. My answer was simple: never. This wasn't a fleeting mistake. It was a calculated betrayal that spanned years. She had countless opportunities to come clean or break it off, but chose not to. I wasn't going to absolve her just because she felt sorry once her lies were exposed. I heard rumors that she wasn't happy living with him, that he was controlling again. It might have given me grim satisfaction, but I tried not to dwell on her misery. My best revenge was cutting her out of my life completely. No more emotional ties, no more second chances. I let her twist in the wind with the consequences of her decisions. Around this time, I started therapy, mostly to deal with the anger and betrayal. My therapist encouraged me to let go of the bitterness, but I refused to confuse letting go with forgiving. I wanted to move on without carrying her memory like a chain around my neck. Slowly, I managed to do exactly that. When the divorce was finalized, I treated myself to a small celebration with a couple of friends. It wasn't exactly a joyous occasion, but it was the official end of an agonizing chapter. 6 months later, I moved to a new place. The lease on our old apartment ended, and I saw no point staying there with ghosts of the past. Packing up my belongings, I found the storage bin full of reminders. I skimmed through them briefly, old photos of happier times, heartfelt notes that now felt hollow. I tossed most of it, keeping only what I might need for legal or financial reasons. During this process, I didn't shed a single tear. Whatever emotional reservoir I had for her had long since dried up. Word got back to me that she reached out to some of my friends, asking if they could convince me to speak with her. Apparently, she wanted closure or one last conversation. I had zero interest. As far as I was concerned, she lost her right to a heart-to-heart the moment she made me her backup plan. I changed my phone number, blocked her on social media, and continued carving out my new life. There was no place in it for her or her manipulative drama. People sometimes asked if I regretted marrying her in the first place. I don't think regret is the right word. I learned a harsh lesson about trust, about vigilance, and about refusing to compromise my self-respect. If I'd never married her, maybe I wouldn't have learned just how far someone can go to deceive a person who loves them. That knowledge, painful as it was, shaped me going forward. I channeled my anger into productivity. I picked up extra responsibilities at work, earned a promotion, and used that momentum to invest in myself. I traveled a bit, visited old friends, and reconnected with distant relatives. My family, once fond of my ex, rallied around me once they understood the depth of her betrayal. I remember my mother's teary outrage, stunned that someone could lie so extensively. I had to reassure her that I was actually better off alone than trapped in that toxic marriage. Gradually, the raw pain faded into a dull ache. I still felt flashes of anger when memories surfaced, but therapy and time helped me process it. I wasn't looking for a rebound or any quick fix. I wanted to rebuild my life with a clear mind, unburdened by bitterness. When I was ready to date again, I promised myself I'd never ignore red flags for the sake of an idealized romance. I'm sure there are decent people out there, but I'll be damned if I ever allow someone to gaslight me the way she did. I made it my mission to trust my instincts more. If something feels off, I won't hesitate to ask questions. I might be more guarded now, but that's the cost of surviving a betrayal like hers. The scars remain, serving as reminders of what I endured. At least they remind me I'm stronger and wiser for it. I'm sharing this story because I'm finally in a place where I can talk about it without rage swallowing me whole. Some might say I should forgive, that holding on to anger isn't healthy. I respectfully disagree. Forgiveness is a gift I reserve for those who show genuine remorse, who haven't systematically lied and manipulated me for years. She wanted to eat her cake and keep it too, to have both her ex and me at her beck and call. When that blew up in her face, she only cried because she was caught. She never once apologized before I forced her hand. If she had come clean earlier, maybe we could have discussed separation or therapy in a more honest context. But that wasn't her style. She pushed me to the edge, hoping I'd remain clueless forever or agree to let her see him openly. That level of disrespect isn't something I'm willing to forgive, no matter how many tears she sheds. This might sound harsh, but I'm not ashamed of it. I took the high road by not dragging her through public humiliation once she signed the divorce papers. I could have, but I didn't. That was mercy enough. These days, I focus on my present and future, not the past. My life is quieter, simpler, and infinitely more honest. I've learned the value of real trust and mutual respect, lessons I carry into every new relationship, friendship, or even casual interaction. So, this is how it ends. I married a woman who promised me the world, then lived a secret life with the ex she supposedly despised. When caught, she wanted an open relationship, effectively asking me to endorse her infidelity. Instead, I gathered my evidence, confronted her with the facts, and refused her pleas for forgiveness. She signed the papers, moved out, and left me to rebuild the life she nearly destroyed. My revenge wasn't explosive or theatrical, it was methodical, legal, and final. I took back control of my finances, my dignity, and my future. That was enough to give me the closure I needed. Let her stay with her ex or chase whatever fleeting highs she needs. I won't be there to pick up the pieces when it falls apart. She gambled on my kindness and she lost. I won't pretend to be a saint here. I felt genuine satisfaction watching her face the consequences. But I'm not proud of that part. It's simply the truth. Betrayal cuts deep, and sometimes the only real justice is ensuring the betrayer can't hurt you again. If she's out there telling people, I'm a monster, so be it. I know my side of the story, and I have the receipts to back it up. I'm done with her games, done pretending I don't see what's right in front of me. The lesson is burned into my mind. Never ignore your instincts, especially when someone begs you to trust them blindly. That's the story of how I discovered my wife's secret affair with her supposedly gone ex and how her request for an open marriage was the final straw. She betrayed me, lied to me, and then tried to spin her cheating into some enlightened relationship model. I refused to forgive, opting instead for the only path that made sense: divorce on my terms, armed with all the evidence she never believed I'd gather. In the aftermath, I found a strength in myself I never knew existed. I learned that choosing myself isn't selfish. It's necessary when someone else is using you like a doormat. Though it hurt like hell to end a relationship I once cherished, it would have hurt even more to stay. If anyone reading this wonders whether they should dig deeper when suspicions arise, my advice is to trust your gut. Ask questions, set boundaries, and never let someone guilt trip you into silence. If you find deception at the core, don't be afraid to protect your interests. Sometimes people don't deserve a second chance, or even closure. Sometimes the best revenge is simply taking back your life and leaving them behind to deal with the wreckage they created. I look at where I am now, finally free from her constant lies, forging new friendships, and rebuilding my foundation. And I feel nothing but relief. She wanted me to stay and accept her twisted arrangement, But I chose to walk away with my head held high. That's the greatest victory I could have asked for.